Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little bit different.
Yeah, a slightly different flavor today.
Right, we're sort of traveling back in time, but we aren't going to some grand battlefield or a royal court. I really want you to picture a very specific, mundane, but honestly incredibly strange moment in history.
It's a Wednesday evening, specifically January 12th, 1966.
Exactly. 9 o'clock sharp, we're in Elmira, New York, and it is bitterly cold outside. You know that kind of upstate New York winter where the air just physically hurts your face?
Yeah, bone-chilling cold.
Right, and we're stepping into the large front room of an apartment occupied by Jane Roberts and her husband, Robert Butts.
Or, as the entity speaking through Jane Seth refers to them, Rupert and Joseph.
And the vibe in this room, it's just fascinating to me. It's relaxed, it's very domestic, but it's also undeniably chilling. I mean, on one hand, you have a husband and wife dealing with the most annoying, gritty problems of daily life. Broken cars, snow, bills.
Right, just totally normal 1960s domestic stuff.
But then on the other hand, the wife is in a deep trance state, channeling a personality that claims to be from another dimension.
It's that intersection of high strangeness and low maintenance. Honestly, that's the beauty of these early sessions. You don't just get the metaphysics, you get the literal biography of their daily lives.
Exactly. And that actually brings us to the hook of today's deep dive. I have a question for you, and well, for everyone listening right now. Have you ever hated a car?
I think everyone has at least one car nemesis in their past.
No, but I mean really hated it. I don't mean just, oh, I wish this had heated seats. I mean, have you ever looked at a machine with such focused, intense, just white-hot disgust that you wanted it to die? You wanted to hurt it back?
Ah, the grumpy old machine syndrome.
Yes. Well, the source material we're diving into today suggests that if you look at that machine with enough disgust, you might actually be the one breaking it. And I don't mean you go out and kick it. I mean your mind literally corrodes the metal.
We are talking about mind over matter, but in the most inconvenient, expensive way possible.
Exactly. So, for context, we are looking at session 222 of the early sessions, book 5 of the Seth Material. And this session is basically a masterclass in how our internal psychology bleeds out into the physical world.
It really is. It affects everything from the corrosion on a spark plug coil to how we experience pain at the dentist and even how we receive information from hundreds of miles away.
Yeah, we have some wild ESP experiments to get through later involving model trains and secret letters that honestly play out like a detective story. But before we unpack all of that, we need to handle the housekeeping.
Like the mandatory stuff.
Yeah. So this deep dive is based on the Seth Material, which is published by New Awareness Network.
And we always say this, but it is so crucial here. If you find this conversation interesting, you really need to go to the source. We're extracting the narrative and the lessons, but there's a specific texture to the original text that you just can't get anywhere else.
Absolutely.
So we strongly encourage you to study the Seth Material books directly. You can find them and visit the bookstore at sethcenter.com/the-early-sessions.
Perfect. And just so everyone is clear, this podcast will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are here to learn, not to sell you a used car. Which is good, because after this, you might be terrified to even own one.
Or at least terrified to yell at one.
Right. So let's set the scene properly for segment 1. Let's call it the grumpy old machine. In the notes for this session, Robert Butts Joseph recounts a week that sounds like an absolute nightmare.
It's the kind of week that really makes you question your life choices. And it all starts with a very simple mistake. He forgets to buy gas.
Which is mistake number 1. You never start a road trip on empty, especially in January in upstate New York.
Right, so he's driving with Jane to visit friends, the Gallaghers, who apparently live on top of this very steep, long hill. It's pitch dark, it's snowing, the road is incredibly slippery, and halfway up the hill, the car it completely loses power.
That is a visceral fear. Stalling on a snowy hill in the dark, that is literally where horror movies start.
Yeah, it's not great. He has to back down the hill in the dark while Jane is walking alongside the car, holding a flashlight so he doesn't drive into a ditch.
Oh, yeah.
They finally get to a driveway, but the car will not start. They have to get it towed.
And this is where what I like to call the oil light war begins. Because, every couple has that one argument that just keeps coming back, right?
Recurring phantom argument, yes.
Robert swears up and down that he checks the oil. He says the warning light on the dashboard was absolutely not on. He is adamant about this. He's like, I sit right in front of it. I would have seen the red light.
But when the mechanic actually checks it, the oil is dangerously low. And Seth the entity they're channeling actually calls him out on it later during the session.
Oh, Seth does not hold back.
Not at all. Seth essentially says, you ignored the light because you didn't want to see it.
But the saga doesn't even end there. The car gets fixed, right? The mechanic says it was just moisture in the distributor, standard winter stuff. But then literally a day later, it happens again.
The exact same scenario. The car refuses to start. It has to be towed a second time.
And this is where it gets genuinely weird. Because the mechanic is a personal friend of theirs. He's not some scammer trying to rip them off. And he is completely baffled.
He tells Robert that there is heavy corrosion on the coil connections. But here's the kicker. He looked at that exact car the day before. He checked everything. And he swears that corrosion was not there 24 hours ago.
Okay, let's just pause here for a second. Because physically, chemically, that shouldn't be possible. Corrosion is oxidation. It's a slow chemical process. You don't just get a year's worth of rust on a coil in an afternoon.
Exactly. Under the normal laws of physics, that kind of oxidation process takes months of exposure.
So in 24 hours, enough corrosion spontaneously appeared on the coil to completely kill the car. And this is where Seth steps in during the session and just drops a total bombshell. He looks at Robert and says, "Joseph, you did this."
Seth coins a phrase for it. He calls it focused destruction.
That is such a heavy metal band name, focused destruction. But he means it literally.
He means it entirely literally. Seth explains that emotional energy is never static. It has to transform. It has to go somewhere. Usually we transform our anger into an action, right? Like yelling or hitting a pillow or maybe going for a run.
But Robert suppressed it. He was just stewing in this intense high-frequency disgust.
He was sitting in the driver's seat, radiating pure hatred at the dashboard. And Seth actually quotes this beautifully. He says, "Your disgust led to the difficulties, not in any nebulous symbolic manner, but in very literal terms."
See, that is the core distinction I really want to drill down on. Usually when we talk about having bad vibes, we mean it metaphorically. Like, oh, I have bad energy with this car, so I'm driving poorly, and that's why I hit a pothole and it breaks. Seth is saying something entirely different.
As is saying, no, your bad energy rearranged the molecular structure of the metal coil. He says Robert created a nice, neat, tangible form of damage.
That sounds like science fiction or practical magic. But if you buy the premise of the Seth material that consciousness creates matter, then it logically follows that highly intense, focused consciousness can alter matter.
Precisely. And what's really fascinating here is that Seth actually congratulates him on it.
Wait, he congratulates him for breaking the car? Like, good job, you stranded us in the snow.
Basically, yes. Because according to Seth, that highly charged negative energy had to go somewhere. Robert had all this stress, this pessimism, this raw disgust. If he hadn't projected it into the car coil, where would it have gone?
Into his own body.
Exactly. Seth uses a body analogy here that I think is quite profound. He says it is much better to have one specific ailment like a pimple or an ulcer, or in this case, a corroded car part, than to have a generalized overall poor condition.
So by breaking the car, Robert essentially saved himself from getting a severe illness.
In a way, yes. He materialized the stress into a specific fixable problem outside of himself. Seth says the destructive elements were concentrated and remedied in a physical fashion. It acts as a safety valve.
Wow. That completely flips the script on how we view accidents or mechanical failures. We almost always think of ourselves as the victims of the machine. Oh, this stupid car broke down on me. I have the worst luck. But Seth is arguing that we are active participants. The car is breaking down for us.
Or because of us. It's a huge aha moment. We externalize our internal chaos. If you're feeling generally crummy and pessimistic, you might manifest a vague, lingering flu. But if you can focus that negativity, you might just blow a tire.
And the blown tire is the healthier option because you can just change a tire.
Right. You can't just unbolt and change a generalized depression.
I'm definitely going to remember that the next time my laptop inexplicably crashes. I'll just be like, thank you, computer, for taking that bullet for my immune system.
I mean, ideally, you wouldn't have the negativity to begin with. But if you do, focused destruction on an inanimate object is better than generalized destruction of your health.
Okay, so we've established that Robert broke the car with his mind. But Seth doesn't stop there. He really wants to dig into why Robert hates this specific car. Because this isn't just about a stalled engine. This is about deep-seated psychological baggage. Which brings us to segment 2, psychoanalyzing the automobile.
This is where Seth puts on his psychologist hat. He looks at Jane and Robert and basically says, "You two are arguing about this car. But you are really arguing about the car. You are arguing about your childhoods.
It is classic relationship dynamics, isn't it? It's never actually about the dirty dishes, and it's never about the spark plugs.
Exactly. Seth points out that the car is a symbol for both of them, but it means totally opposite things to each of them. Let's start with Rupert, or Jane. Why was she so defensive of the car? Why did she want to keep it, even when it was constantly breaking down and costing them money?
Context is so key here. We have to remember Jane's background. Her mother was an invalid. She was completely housebound with severe rheumatoid arthritis.
Right, so for Jane, growing up in that environment, mobility was the most precious commodity in the entire world. She used to run everywhere, just to prove to herself that she could move. So to her, an automobile, literally any automobile, even a rusty clunker, represents absolute freedom.
It's an extension of her own legs.
That's exactly it. Seth says it does not matter whether the car is old or new as long as she has one. A lack of a car symbolizes a return to poverty. It symbolizes being physically stuck, just like her mother was.
And there's a strong connection to her father, too, isn't there?
Yes, her father was someone who was always on the move. So the car acts as a complementary image of her father. It represents the ability to escape, to go, to do things. So when Robert is attacking the car, he's not just complaining about a machine. To Jane's subconscious, he's attacking her freedom and her safety net.
Now let's pivot to Robert. His perspective is totally different, and honestly, this part made me laugh a bit because it is so incredibly specific. It explains so much about a certain type of personality. Robert's father made car batteries by hand. In the 1920s or 30s, can you even imagine the level of detail that requires?
Robert grew up watching his father craft these complex batteries with absolute perfectionism. His father took immense pride and excellence in things working exactly as they were designed to.
So, to Robert, what does a broken down, corroded old car represent?
It represents failure, complete imperfection. It's a slap in the face. It's almost an insult to his heritage of craftsmanship. Seth says it so well. He says, your father would like to kick at old cars for he felt that they defied him since they worked improperly.
Defied him. That is such a deeply human way to look at an inanimate machine. So every time the car stalls, Robert isn't just annoyed about the inconvenience or the tow bill. He feels it as a personal defiance. The machine is actively mocking his standards.
And it goes even deeper than that. Seth brings up a very specific childhood trauma, a road trip to California when Robert was only 3 years old.
A cross-country road trip in the 1920s, that sounds like an absolute ordeal even without any family drama. There were barely paved roads back then.
And there was plenty of family drama. Seth says the parents bickered the entire time. They were pessimistic, they blamed each other for leaving home, they were totally uncertain of what they would find when they got there.
So little 3-year-old Robert is just sitting in the back seat, soaking all this tension up like a sponge. The literal vibration of the car is tied to the vibration of his parents fighting.
He's absorbing the core idea that cars equal conflict. Cars equal immense stress. Cars equal parents fighting and being deeply unhappy. Seth says the adventure was actually stressful. So consciously, Robert thinks, I hate this car because it costs money to fix. But subconsciously, he hates it because being in a broken car triggers that 3-year-old's profound anxiety.
It's amazing how these patterns stick with us for decades. You think you're just mad about a mechanic spill, but you're actually reliving a cross-country trauma from 40 years ago.
And that is the humorous, yet kind of tragic contradiction Seth is pointing out. They are fighting about a piece of metal, but Jane is fighting for freedom from her mother's illness, and Robert is fighting against his father's perfectionism and his parents' unhappy marriage.
And the poor car is just sitting out in the snow, taking all the psychic damage.
Exactly. Seth's advice to them is simple, but obviously very difficult to execute. He tells them to recognize these hidden symbols. Once Robert realizes why he hates the imperfection of the car, he can consciously stop projecting that focused destruction onto it.
It's about separating the object from the emotional baggage. But this whole idea of mind over matter doesn't just apply to breaking things, right? It also applies to fixing things, or at least fixing your physical experience of reality. Which brings us right into segment 3, practical magic.
Which perfectly transitions us from the car to the dentist chair, which, let's be honest, for many people is a place of pure terror.
Robert actually had a dentist appointment that exact same day. And apparently, he decided to treat it as a little experiment. He wanted to see if he could use these Seth principles to intentionally block pain.
He deliberately put himself into what he called a light trance and used mental suggestion.
And it actually worked.
Seth says it was excellent. He says Robert felt absolutely no pain while in the chair. He literally congratulates him on his control under stress.
That is a superpower. I think everyone listening right now wishes they could just toggle a switch in their brain and turn off dental pain. But how did he actually do it? Is it just repeating, "I will not feel pain"?
It's more about directing your focus away from the physical sensation. But what's really interesting here is that Seth takes this dental technique and suggests Robert apply it to something even more painful than a root canal.
Family gatherings.
Dealing with difficult parents, exactly. Seth suggests that Robert can use this exact same trance and suggestion technique when interacting with his parents.
So wait, you treat interacting with your parents like you're undergoing a dental procedure. That is incredibly cold.
In a way, sure, but it's about emotional self-preservation. Seth says, and I'll quote this because it's great, with them, you simply need the suggestion that you will only react to constructive suggestions.
Okay, an emotional spam filter. I really like the sound of that. But have you ever actually tried to do this in real life? Say your mom is criticizing your career choices or your dad is asking why you aren't married yet. Can you really just light trance that away?
It's definitely harder in practice than Seth makes it sound. But think about the dentist part of the equation. Robert sat in a clinical chair with a high-speed drill in his mouth, hitting a tooth, and felt nothing. Those are intense physical nerve impulses that he successfully blocked.
Which is objectively much harder to do than blocking a verbal emotional insult.
Precisely. Seth's argument is highly logical. If you have the mental focus to block the signal of a drill hitting a raw nerve, why on earth can't you block the signal of a mother's criticism hitting your ego? It is the exact same mechanism of consciousness.
You're disassociating the external stimulus from your internal reaction.
You aren't necessarily disassociating. You're filtering. Seth says the suggestion is, I will only react to constructive suggestions. It's a highly active choice. It gives you an emotional immunity. You aren't ignoring them. You aren't storming out of the room. You are still fully engaging in the conversation, but you have set an impenetrable boundary in your own mind.
Emotional waterproofing.
Right. Seth says this allows you to help them while remaining free yourself. Because if you get dragged down into their negativity, you can't help anyone. You just become part of the mess. Just like that stressful car trip to California.
I think that is a tool we can all use immediately. The next time you're at a holiday dinner and a relative starts criticizing your life choices, just mentally engage the dentist protocol. Light trance on, filter engaged.
I am only reacting to constructive suggestions. It really is a game changer for family dynamics.
So we've covered telekinetic car vandalism and dental hypnosis. Now we have to get into the really woo-woo stuff, the remote ESP experiments. This is segment 4, the Dr. InStream experiments.
Right. So to set the stage, Jane and Robert are conducting these formal tests for a researcher named Dr. InStream. They don't seem to know him very well personally, or at least they are doing these tests entirely remotely.
The basic setup is that Jane, while in trance channeling, Seth tries to identify objects hidden in sealed envelopes or predict specific future events related to this doctor.
And during this session, Seth interrupts the normal flow of conversation to give a spontaneous prediction. He starts getting very vivid impressions about a student of Dr. InStream.
He describes a blue chair.
And it's highly specific. He says he sees blue upholstery with something like small tacks in it that are indented.
That's such a random granular detail. Indented tacks.
But that's usually the hallmark of genuine psychic data. It's rarely a vague, I see a tall, dark stranger. It's almost always, I see a blue chair with indented tacks. Seth connects this specific chair to a student and predicts that a planned meeting for the spring or summer is going to undergo a major change. He literally says, underline overall.
Meaning the change is highly significant to the schedule.
Exactly. And he also mentioned the letter coming from New York with the initial P. We don't get the final verification for this specific prediction in the session itself, but the specificity is striking. However, where this session really shines is the envelope test. This is where we get to see the real detective work happen.
Let's break down that envelope test. Robert hands Jane a sealed double envelope. Inside is a piece of paper, a letter.
The letter is from Robert's brother, Lauren, and it's folded tightly inside a piece of Bristol board. Jane has absolutely no conscious idea what's in there. She hasn't seen it, hasn't touched the contents.
And Seth just starts firing off these impressions. And the hits, the undeniably correct details are pretty wild. The first major impression is this phrase, the habit of squirreling away.
Which at first sounds like a personality metaphor.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, someone involved is secretive or saves money.
But Robert immediately connects it to a physical location. His father has a photographic studio down in the basement of his house. But the rest of that basement, it is a total hoarder's paradise.
It is absolutely stuffed to the ceiling with junk. Robert's father literally squirrels away everything he can find. It's a massive fire hazard. And the letter inside the envelope, it was written by the brother, Lauren, who had recently taken some photos for the letter inside that exact basement studio.
So the squirreling away impression isn't actually about the person writing the letter. It's about the physical atmosphere of the location where the object originated.
Exactly. And then Seth says, 4 people.
And there were exactly 4 people present in that basement studio when the photos were taken. Jane, Robert, the father, and the brother. That is a direct, undeniable hit.
Then he says he picks up a paper item, which obviously it's a letter written on paper. But then comes the really impressive one, the one that genuinely gave me chills reading it. Seth says, I pick up a very distant connection with Wisconsin.
Now, why is this so impressive? Wisconsin is a massive place. Maybe someone just really likes cheese.
Because Jane and Robert live in New York. The brother, who wrote the letter, lives in Pennsylvania. There's absolutely no logical, conscious reason for the state of Wisconsin to pop up in this reading. In fact, Jane actually pauses in the trance and says she doesn't understand it. She feels like the impression is wrong.
But Robert figures it out a couple of days later.
It takes him 2 full days of racking his brain, and then it finally clicks. His brother Lauren writes articles for a magazine called Model Railroader.
And where's the headquarters for Model Railroader magazine published?
Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
That is just a fantastic connection.
And here is the absolute key to why this matters. Jane knew absolutely nothing about model trains or where that specific magazine was published. It was completely outside her conscious sphere of knowledge. So where did that information come from?
It had to come from the brother's mind, imprinted onto the letter, and then read by Seth.
Exactly. And Seth doubles down on the train imagery. He mentions seeing objects seen from above.
Which is exactly how you view a miniature model train layout. You stand over the table and look down at it.
And he also mentions seeing something like a flag.
And Robert speculates later that many railroad corporate logos are flag-shaped, and his brother frequently draws these logos for his articles. So you can really see how the mind is grasping at these visual symbols. Wisconsin, looking down, flags. It's kind of like a complex game of charades being played via telepathy.
But it's not all perfect. There is a miss in the reading, or at least what initially looks like a miss. And honestly, this is the most educational part of the entire session.
This moves us into segment 5. The mechanics of perception, because if Seth is this highly evolved, all-knowing entity, why does he ever get stuff wrong?
Well, during the reading, Seth mentions the name Lois. He says, now this remark leads Rupert to think of Lois.
But Lois wasn't in the basement. Lois didn't write the letter. Lois has absolutely nothing to do with model trains or Wisconsin.
No, she doesn't.
Okay.
But here's the psychological twist. Lois had taken some portrait photos of Jane very recently, and the brother, Lauren, had also taken photos of Jane recently. And both of these sets of photos were for the exact same purpose. They were headshots for Jane's upcoming ESP book.
So the mental wires just got crossed.
I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around the mechanics of this. Seth is a distinct entity, right? Why doesn't he just bypass Jane and know the truth directly? Why does he get confused by Jane's personal memories?
This is the core of the mechanics of perception part. Imagine Jane's subconscious mind as a massive filing cabinet or library. Seth is trying to find a specific book, the data about the brother's letter. He sends a mental query into the library. Photos plus book.
Okay, like a search engine algorithm.
Exactly. But Jane's library has a very recent, bright, shiny file sitting right on the front desk labeled Photos plus Book, and it features her friend Lois.
So the search algorithm just grabs the fastest, strongest result.
It grabs the strongest personal association. Seth actually calls this Gestalt consciousness. He isn't bypassing Jane's mind. He is forced to work through her neurological and psychological pathways. So if her personal associations are loud enough, they will distort the incoming psychic signal.
That actually makes the miss so much more interesting than the hits. It shows the actual machinery at work behind the scenes. It's not just infallible magic. It's a biological and psychological process.
Seth explains it by saying the data is legitimate to important layers of the personality. It's not strictly wrong information. It's just misfiled by the medium's brain. He compares the whole process to dreams. Dreams often seem incredibly confusing because we view this raw psychic data only through our own highly personal, often chaotic associations.
Seth says the human mind has to learn to distinguish between a pure incoming psychic signal and a triggered personal memory. It is a practice skill. It's a lot like tuning an old analog radio. You might get loud static from a strong nearby station, which is Lois, while you're trying desperately to tune in to a faint, distant station, which is the brother.
That makes the whole channeling process seem so much more mechanical and learnable rather than just purely mystical. And speaking of the mechanics of the session, we really have to talk about the ending, the genuinely spooky detail.
Yeah, the third person.
Yeah. Right at the end, Jane mentions that during the session, she felt a distinct physical presence in the room with them.
She says she felt a strong rapport with this person and actually hated to see them leave. She describes it as a literal third person standing in the room, completely separate from her and Robert and separate from Seth.
So who was it?
We really don't know. Was it Dr. Instream projecting himself astrally to watch the experiment? Was it an aspect of the brother checking in on the letter? Or was it just some other curious entity dropping by to watch the show?
It adds that layer of chill we talked about in the intro. You're sitting in your living room, the snow is falling heavily outside, your car is broken, and suddenly you realize it's not just the two of you in the room.
It really reminds us that the boundaries between here and there are much, much thinner than we generally prefer to think.
So let's try to bring this all together. What does this all actually mean for us? We've gone from corroding car coils with anger to blocking dental pain with trance to reading sealed letters from Wisconsin.
I think the main through line here is connection. We are deeply physically connected to our environment in ways we barely realize. We aren't just passive observers walking through a dead world.
We are participants.
We are highly active creators. Robert's raw disgust physically changed the molecular structure of the car. His mental suggestion physically changed his neurological pain response. And Jane's mind reached out across physical space to touch the history of a letter written by his brother.
It completely dissolves the barrier between mind and matter.
Precisely. If there is one major takeaway you should have from session 222, it's that your attitude is a literal, tangible form of energy. And that energy has immediate physical consequences.
Which leads us nicely to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
We talked a lot about focus destruction, breaking a machine with pure disgust. But let's flip that coin.
What happens if you use focus restoration?
Exactly. If you can corrode a metal coil with hate, can you lubricate a failing engine with gratitude? Can you fix a glitchy computer or a freezing phone just by deliberately changing your internal vibe from frustration to patience?
And take it a step further, what are we doing to the actual people around us? If focused disgust can rot solid metal, what is it doing to your spouse, your children, or your coworkers when you hold on to that quiet, simmering resentment day after day?
We might literally be corroding the people we love without ever lifting a physical finger.
That is a very heavy thought to leave you with.
But I think it's an empowering one, too. Because if you have the power to break it, you inherently have the power to fix it.
This has been a deep dive into session 222 of the Seth Material.
And again, we highly encourage you to go directly to the source, read the books, visit sethcenter.com for the early sessions. There is so much more depth there than we could ever cover in an hour.
This podcast will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. Thank you all for listening.
And good luck with your car this winter.
Drive safe. And please be nice to your dashboard.